chapter, this last Sunday, February 2025. I say that for, those who are going to watch this online several years from now. Nobody watched it right now. So, I can hope. We are, as y'all know, the narrative last week, Jerusalem was captured. The people were taken away. The better of the people, the royals were killed. The better of the people were taken off into exile, and the poorest of the poor were left, and the oldest of the old were left. Jeremiah, who had been captive in the temple court, had been set. He had originally been taken with the group going to exile with it when Nebuzaradan, the commander of the forces, realized that Jeremiah was part of it. Apparently, it was good things about him. So he let him go and told him, "Hey, you can go anywhere you want. My recommendations are you come back with us. We'll treat you well because you're respected, or you can stay here under the protection of Gedaliah, who was a good guy, was put in charge, but he'll be people." Or you don't decide either of those things, you can go do whatever you want. Here's a gift, here's some food, bye. And so Jeremiah chose to stay there in Jerusalem. The fields are gone. There's nothing to harvest. There's nothing to sow. It is a desolate time. And so we come to the book after Jeremiah in the Bible, which is believed to have been written by Jeremiah, called Lamentations. It's five chapters. Each chapter is a prayer of lament. We're only going to get through like 3 of them today. And then I'll explain how the next few weeks are going to go. But anyway, so let me go ahead and share our screen here. We have a video to watch, but we're going to do a new book. So we'll watch a little video. No popcorn. You want to go pop it? Okay. Can you get that slide?
The Book of Lamentations. It's a unique book in the Old Testament that contains 5 poems from an anonymous author who survived and is now reflecting back on the Babylonian siege of Jerusalem and the destruction and the exile that followed. Remember the whole story from the book of 2 Kings. The fall of Jerusalem and the exile was the most horrendous catastrophe in Israel's history up to this point. So remember, God had promised Abraham the land. He'd given David victory to make Jerusalem Israel's capital. And from David came the royal line of kings. You had God's presence there in the temple, and that's where the priests maintained the rituals of Israel's worship. And after 500 years of all of this history, in the summer of 587 BC, the city fell to Babylon. It was all decimated and gone. And so the Book of Lamentations is a memorial to the pain and confusion of the Israelites that followed this destruction. Now, the lament poems found here are not unique in the Bible. There's lots of them in the book of Psalms. And these biblical poems of lament, they do a number of things. They're a form of protest. They're a way of drawing everybody's attention, including God's attention, to the horrible things that happen in this world that should not be tolerated. They're a way of processing emotion. So in these poems, God's people vent their anger and dismay at the ruin caused by people's sin and selfishness. And these poems are a place to voice confusion. Suffering makes us ask questions about God's character and promises, and none of this is looked down on in the Bible. Just the opposite. These poems of lament give a sacred dignity to human suffering. And so these human words of grief that are addressed to God have now become part of God's word to his people. The design of these 5 poems is very intentional. It's part of the book's message. So chapters 1 through 4 are called acrostics, which means alphabet poems. Each poetic verse begins with a new letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is made up of 22 letters. Now, this very ordered and linear structure, it's in stark contrast to the disorder of the pain and the confused grief that's explored in these poems. So it's like Israel's suffering is explored A to Z and is trying to express something that is inexpressible. Chapters 1 and 2 each have one verse per letter, giving them a really similar design, but the themes are very different. So chapter 1 focuses on the grief and shame of a figure called Lady Zion. The poet personifies the city of Jerusalem as a widow, also called the daughter of Zion. And she sits alone. She's bereaved of her loved ones, devastated. No one comes to comfort her. It's a very powerful metaphor. And then Lady Zion speaks. She calls on the Lord to notice her fate. And through this image, the poet, he's showing that the city's destruction brought a level of psychological trauma on the Israelites that can only be expressed as the experience of a funeral and the death of a loved one. Chapter 2 focuses on the fall of Jerusalem and how it was a consequence of Israel's sin and was brought about by God's wrath, which is a key word in this poem. Now, it's important to remember that in the Bible, God's wrath is not spontaneous, volatile anger. The biblical poets and prophets, they use this word to talk about God's justice. So Israel had entered a covenant agreement with God, and for centuries they've been violating it by worshiping other gods, perpetrating injustice, oppressing the poor. And so, yes, God is slow to anger, but he eventually does get angry at human evil, and he will bring his just anger in the form of punishment. In the case of Jerusalem, this involved allowing Babylon to come and conquer the city. And so this poem is acknowledging that God's wrath is justified, but this doesn't keep the poet from lamenting and asking God to show compassion once again. Chapter 3 breaks this design pattern by having 3 verses per letter, so it's the longest poem in the book. And the voice is that of a lonely man speaking out of his suffering and grief as a representative of the whole people. And what's interesting is that this chapter is full of language that's drawn from other parts of the Old Testament, from the laments of Job and from other important lament psalms, and even from the suffering servant poems in Isaiah. And the poet sees his hardship as a form of God's justice, like chapter 2 said. But paradoxically, this is what gives the poet hope. And it leads him to offer the only hopeful words in the whole book. Because of the Lord's covenant faithfulness, we do not perish. His mercies never fail. They're new every morning. How great is your faithfulness, O God. So I say to myself, the Lord is my inheritance, therefore I will put my hope in him. So the poet reasons, if God is consistent enough to bring his justice on human evil, then he'll also be consistent with his covenant promise to not allow evil to get the final word. And so for this poet, God's judgment is the seedbed of hope for the future. Chapter 4 goes back to the same alphabet structure as chapters 1 and 2, and is a vivid and disturbing depiction of the 2-year siege in Jerusalem. And it contrasts how things used to be in Jerusalem of the past and how terrible they became in the siege. So children used to laugh and play in the streets, but now they beg for food. The wealthy used to eat lavish meals, but now they eat whatever they can find in the dirt. And the royal leaders used to be full of splendor, but now they're famished and dirty and unrecognizable. And the anointed king from the line of David has been captured and dragged away. So the poem's power comes from the shock of these contrasts, and it's exploring the depth of the suffering that Israel brought on itself. Now, the final poem is unique because it breaks the design pattern. It's the same length as all of the other alphabet poems, but the alphabet order is gone. It's like the poet can't hold it together anymore, and his grief has exploded back into chaos. The poem is a communal prayer for God's mercy. Israel begs God not to ignore their suffering or abandon them. And the poem offers a long list of all of the different kinds of people who were devastated by the fall of the city. They ask God not to forget these people, and they lament on behalf of others, giving voice to their pain. Suffering in silence is just not a virtue in this book. God's people are not asked to deny their emotions, but voice their protest, to vent their feelings and pour it all out before God. The book ends with something of a paradox. The poet acknowledges that God is the eternal king of the world, but also that Israel's circumstances make them feel like God is nowhere to be found. And so the final words of the book leave this tension totally unresolved. It asks, unless you've totally rejected us, and the book ends. The poet doesn't offer a nice, neat conclusion, much like our own experiences of pain and suffering. The story of the Bible doesn't end here, but this very important book shows us how lament and prayer and grief are a crucial part of the journey of faith of God's people in a broken world. And that's what the book of Lamentations is all about.
So, Lamentations chapter 1, verse 1. How lonely sits the city that once was full of people. How like a widow she has become, she that was great among the nations. She that was a princess among the provinces has become subject to forced labor. She weeps bitterly in the night with tears on her cheeks. Among all her lovers, she has no one to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They have become her enemies. Judah has gone into exile with suffering and hard servitude. She lives now among the nations. She finds no resting place. Her pursuers have all overtaken her in the midst of her distress. The roads to Zion mourn, for no one comes to her festivals. All her gates are desolate. Her priests groan. Her young girls grieve, and her lot is bitter. Her foes have become the masters. Her enemies prosper because the Lord has made her suffer for the multitude of her transgressions. The word transgressions here is in the Hebrew pesa, which literally means rebellions. Her children have gone away, captives before the foe. From daughter Zion has departed all her majesty. Her princes have become like stags that find no pasture. They fled without strength before the pursuer. Jerusalem remembers all the precious things that were hers in days of old, when her people fell into the hand of the enemy and there was no one to help her. The enemy looked on. They mocked over her downfall. Jerusalem sinned grievously, so she has become a filthy thing. All who honored her despise her, for they have seen her nakedness. She herself groans and turns her face away. Her uncleanness was in her skirts. She took no thought of her future. Her downfall was appalling with none to comfort her. Look, O Lord, at my affliction, for the enemy has triumphed. Enemies have stretched out their hands over all her precious things. She has even seen the nations invade her sanctuary, those whom you forbade to enter your congregation. All her people groan as they search for bread. They trade their treasures for food to revive their lives. Look, O Lord, and see how worthless I have become. Is it nothing to you, all you who pass by? Look and see if there is any sorrow like my sorrow, which was brought upon me, which the Lord inflicted on the day of his fierce anger. From on high he sent fire. It went deep into my bones. He spread a net for my feet. He turned me back. He has left me stunned, faint, all day long. My transgressions were bound into a yoke. By his hand they were fastened together. They weigh on my neck, sapping my strength. The Lord handed me over to those whom I cannot withstand. The Lord has rejected all my warriors in the midst of me. He proclaimed a time against me to crush my young men. The Lord has trodden, as in a winepress, the virgin daughters. For these things I weep. My eyes flow with tears, for a comforter is far from me, one to revive my courage. My children are desolate, for the enemy has prevailed. Zion stretches out her hands, but there is no one to comfort her. The Lord has commanded against Jacob that his neighbors should become exposed. Jerusalem has become a filthy thing among them. The Lord is in the right, for I have rebelled against his word. But hear, all you peoples, and behold my suffering. My young women and young men have gone into captivity. I called to my lovers, but they deceived me. My priests and elders perished in the city while seeking food to revive their lives. Look, O Lord, at how distressed I am. My stomach churns, my heart is wrung within me because I have been very rebellious. In the street, the sword bereaves. In the house, it is like death. They heard how I was groaning, with no one to comfort me. All my enemies heard of my trouble. They are glad that you have done it. Bring on the day that you have announced, and let them be as I am. Let all their evil doing come before you, and deal with them as you have dealt with me because of all my transgressions. For my groans are many, and my heart is faint. Woo! Now the Lord in his anger has humiliated. He has thrown down from heaven to earth the splendor of Israel. He has not remembered his footstool. Here, that phrase is understood as temple. In the day of his anger, the Lord has destroyed without mercy all the dwellings of Jacob. In his wrath, he has broken down the strongholds of daughter Judah. He has brought down to the ground and dishonored the kingdom and its rulers. He has cut down in fierce anger all the might of Israel. He has withdrawn his right hand from them in the face of the enemy. He has burned like a flaming fire in Jacob, consuming all around. There's that image of fire from the first chapter. Now, he has bent his bow like an enemy, with his right hand set like a foe. Now that's an interesting image there, because he's bent his bow like an enemy. Well, what happens when a bow is bent? Or how do you bend a bow? You pull the string back. Yeah, that's how the bow is bent. He has killed all those in him we took pride, in the tent of daughter Zion. He has poured out his fury like fire. The Lord has become an enemy. He has destroyed Israel. He has destroyed all its places, palaces, laid in ruin its stronghold, and multiplied in daughter Judah mourning and lamentation. He has broken down his booth like a garden, and he has destroyed his tabernacle. The Lord has abolished in Zion festival and Sabbath, and in his fierce indignation has spurned king and priest. The Lord has scorned his altar, disowned his sanctuary. He has delivered into the hand of the enemy the walls of her palaces. A clamor was raised in the house of the Lord as on a day of festival. The Lord determined to lay in ruins the wall of daughter Zion. He stretched the line. He did not withhold his hand from the Lord. He caused rampart and wall to lament. They languished together. Her gates have sunk into the ground. He has ruined and broken her bars. Her king and princes are among the nations. Guidance is no more, and her prophets obtain no vision from the Lord. The elders of daughter Zion sit on the ground in silence. They have thrown dust on their heads. They put on sackcloth. The young women of Jerusalem have bowed their heads to the ground. My eyes are spent with weeping. My stomach churns. My bile is poured out on the ground because of the destruction of my people, because infants and babes faint in the streets of the city. They cry to their mothers, where is bread and wine? As they faint like the wounded in the streets of the city, as their life is poured out on their mother's bosom. What can I say for you? To what compare you, O daughter Jerusalem? To what can I liken you that I may comfort you, O virgin daughter Zion? For vast as the sea is your ruin, who can heal you? Your prophets have seen for you false and deceptive visions. They have not exposed your iniquity to restore your fortunes, but have seen oracles for you that are false and misleading. All who pass along the way clap their hands at you. That means they're mocking them. Okay. They hiss and wag their heads at daughter Jerusalem. Is this the city that was called the perfection of beauty, the joy of all the earth? All your enemies open their mouths against you. They hiss, they gnash their teeth, they cry, we have devoured her. Ah, this is the day we long for it. Last we have seen it. The Lord has done what he purposed. He has carried out his threat as he ordained long ago. He has demolished without pity. He has made the enemy rejoice over you and exalted the might of your foes. Cry aloud to the Lord, O wall of daughter Zion. Let tears stream down like a torrent day and night. Give yourself no rest, your eyes no resting. Arise, cry out in the night at the beginning of the watches. Pour out your heart like water before the presence of the Lord. Lift your hands to him for the lives of your children who faint for hunger at the head of every tree. Look, O Lord, and consider, to whom have you done this? Should women eat their offspring, the children they have born? Should priest and prophet be killed in the sanctuary of the Lord? The young and the old are lying on the ground in the streets. My young women and my young men have fallen by the sword. In the day of your anger, you have killed them, slaughtering without mercy. You invited my enemies from all around, as if for a day of festival. And on the day of the anger of the Lord, no one escaped or survived. Those whom I bore and reared, my enemies destroyed. Okay. Well, that's chapter 2. Going on to chapter 3. This will be it for today. We've got some things to do. I am one who has seen affliction under the rod of God's wrath. He has driven and brought me into darkness without any light. Against me alone he turns his hand, and again, all day long. He has made my flesh and my skin waste away. He has broken my bones. He has besieged and enveloped me with bitterness and tribulation. He has made me sit in darkness like the dead of long ago. He has walled me about so that I cannot escape. He has put heavy chains on me. Though I call and cry for help, he shuts out my prayer. He has blocked my ways with hewn stones. He has made my paths crooked. He is a bear lying in wait for me, a lion in hiding. He led me off my way and tore me to pieces. He has made me desolate. He bent his bow and set me as a mark for his arrow. He shot into my vitals, the arrows of his quiver. Interesting, the word vitals there literally is kidneys. But we get the message. I have become the laughing stock of all my people, the object of their taunt songs all day long. He has filled me with bitterness. He has sated me with wormwood. He has made my teeth grind on gravel. He has made me cower in ashes. Teeth grind on gravel. What do you think that means? Hurt. Well, yeah, it can mean a couple of things. Number one, that his hurt is so much that he's ground his teeth into nothing. Or it could be that they're scrounging in the dirt for everything that's possible, even if, of course, it's impossible to eliminate the ground. My soul is bereft of peace. I have forgotten what happiness is. So I say, gone is my glory and all that I had hoped for from the Lord. The thought of my affliction and my homelessness is wormwood and gall. My soul continually thinks of me and is bowed down within me. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Okay, we'll get to the hope here in a minute. Lamentations serves a lot for the inspiration for many of the hymns that we have in our hymn book. Wormwood and gall is just one of them. Okay, so on to the hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. Steadfast love is essay. Can you say essay? Okay, essay. His mercies never come to an end. Rahamim is from the root word rahim, which is womb. So mercy there, the plural mercies means from the womb. Yeah. It's basically his. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. You know that song. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul that seeks him. It is good that no one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for one to bear the yoke of youth, to sit alone in silence when the Lord has imposed it, to put one's mouth to the dust. There may yet be hope. To give one's cheek to the smiter and be filled with insults. For the Lord will not reject forever. Although he causes grief, he will have compassion according to the abundance of his steadfast love. What is steadfast love? Essay. For he does not willingly afflict or grieve anyone. When all the prisoners of the land are crushed underfoot. When justice is perverted in the presence of the Most High. When one's case is subverted, does the Lord not see it? Who can command and have it done if the Lord has not ordained it? Is it not from the mouth of the Most High that evil and good come? Why should any who draw breath complain about the punishment of their sins? Let us test and examine our ways and return to the Lord. Let us lift up our hearts as well as our hands to God in heaven. We have transgressed and rebelled, and you have not forgiven. You have wrapped yourself with anger and pursued us, killing without pity. You have wrapped yourself with a cloud so that no prayer can pass through. You have made us filth and rubbish among the peoples. All our enemies have opened their mouths against us. Panic and pitfall have come upon us. Devastation and destruction. My eyes flow with rivers of tears because of the destruction of my people. My eyes flow without ceasing, without respite, until the Lord from heaven looks down and sees. My eyes cause me grief at the fate of all the young women in my city. Those who were my enemies without cause have hunted me like a bird. They have flung me alive into a pit and hurled stones on me. Water closed over my head. I said, I am lost. I called on your name, O Lord, from the depths of the pit. You heard my plea. Do not close your ear to my cry for help, but give me relief. You came near when I called on you. You said, do not fear. You have taken up my cause, O Lord. You have redeemed my life. You have seen the wrong done to me, O Lord. Judge my cause. You have seen all their malice, all their plots against me. You have heard their taunts, O Lord, all their plots against me. The whispers and murmurs of my assailants are against me all day long. Whether they sit or rise, see, I am the object of their taunt songs. Pay them back for their deeds, O Lord, according to the work of their hands. Give them anguish of heart, your curse beyond them. Pursue them in anger and destroy them from under the Lord's. Okay. Oh, I've got to do the next time. Oh, okay. Anyway, well, next time would have been Lamentations 4 and 5, and we would have started this apocryphal book, not in our, not in the Catholic Bible, but a different book called the Apocalypse of Thor. Now, I say we would have, because we are at a stopping point in the narrative. I'm not going to make going 70 years for the exile, but at the same time, we're coming up on Lent and Easter, and one of the suggestions that came out of the small group meetings that we had, Karen and I hosted, was they would like to see some different things in Sunday schools, some different lessons, things like that. So, so we're doing that. So during Lent, we're going to have a different Sunday school lesson. This stuff is. It's very much like House Church Bible Study. If you've been a part of that, it's a little reading thing, it's some questions, and then we'll go over them. Now, I'm going to be gone 1 week during Lent. I don't know which week yet. So in order to make this 6 weeks work, I've got to start it next week. Okay? That makes sense? Okay. So I'll hand these out here in a moment, but it's called How Do We Know God Loves Us? 6 weeks. How do we know God? Okay. If anybody, I've made 10 copies, I can make more copies if I need to. Invite you to. It's very exciting. It's going to be, we're not going to use the screen, at least that's not the plan. You've got to have to convert all this into PowerPoint. But this is something you can write in, all that kind of stuff. And it's a time for sharing, much like House Church Bible Study. There are some assignments. There are some, it's encouraged. You're encouraged to answer the question. Write down things like week one, like question number 5 said, write a prayer thanking God for his enduring love for you. So when we get to that point during the study, I'll have 1 or 2 invite us to read that prayer. Probably just 1, because of the following question, which is, what response does this prayer evoke from God? And so people hearing that prayer for the first time, what does that evoke? What response? Anyway, so that's kind of the plan. That makes sense? Okay. Okay. So any questions about today's lesson? That was harsh. And I think, definitely there are some allusions to Job, obviously. But, I hear this and I think about the destruction in the Middle East, the things going on there. We have examples here as well, but we have to respond. We've got used to it. So we typically respond with it. In some of those third countries, there's nobody going to drop, go bring in food. I can see the reason. Just like there's nobody paying it. There's nobody paying it because every place around the food. Hopeless. Very glad that the other fights. What a good prophet does. Even amidst all the bad omens and bad prophecies, Repent. These people, they've reached that point, and in order to Jeremiah, they know what they know it's come. I can hope that we do never come to moving towards the end. So we're always like, so we can do all the things that they need to get work and work and start all of it. So, and there's a lot of stuff in between that. What I can say is I'm not worried. I'm at peace with whatever God's will is. Either way. Probably God. I'm looking forward to it. At the age of 47 years off that, still wondering. And of course, Israel has been taking that whole time. It's the Messiah of the show. They've been taking that for 5,000 years now. So anyway, I, that's a rough estimate. Probably a little bit of a exaggeration, but still a long time. 40 years. We'll say 40 years. Well, 40 years is right now, but still a long time. In Hebrew, 40, the number 40 means a lot. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and end it now. Thinkers have to get to practice. Oh, I forgot here. Here, let me point these out. So, this other thing has to do with the very first paragraph of this. It's called The Hound of Heaven. It's a poem written by Francis Thompson, back in the 1800s. You can read that to make sense of what follows, okay? And it's kind of old English that has been retranslated into something that we can understand, and it's still a little difficult to understand, so just giving you a heads up. You're welcome. I didn't like I had Comp 101 as my first. It was a lot of reading and writing. I really didn't like it, so I plotted it out. So, comp and Red 101. Okay. Oh, First paragraph.